This story is about a land that offers no spectacle in the usual sense of the word. There are no mountain ranges, no deserts, no volcanoes. There is something else, something that does not strike you immediately, but then does not let go. This is a story about a place where a glacier is still at work 20,000 years after it retreated, about a forest that no one cut down simply because no one got around to it, about a river that every spring stops being a river and becomes a shallow sea stretching dozens of kilometers in every direction. This place has nothing to offer in the way that others take pride in, but it has something that almost nowhere else does. Ancient oaks that have stood for 8 centuries, their bark cut through with deep fissures, their trunks so thick that 3 adults cannot wrap their arms around them. A bog where peat goes down several meters, which means that in its lowest layers lie pollen from Bronze Age trees and seeds of plants that no longer exist in this part of Europe. An animal that has roamed here since the time when the last wild member of its kind was still alive, and which was brought back slowly through zoos and breeding programs. A forest where dead trees are never cleared away, because that is not neglect but principle, one you only understand when you start to look more carefully. And all of this holds together not thanks to humans, but in spite of them. Because the country is large, the people are few, and slowness here works as protection. But this protection is not permanent. The climate is changing, bogs are being drained, spruce in the forests is dying from bark beetle, and what took millennia to accumulate is disappearing in years. And what matters more, what is beautiful, or what has simply existed for a long time? What dazzles at first glance, or what you need to see, hear, live through in order to finally feel it? And how much time do we have left to feel it before the peat exhales its carbon, before the spruce forest gives way to something else, while the ancient oak still stands? Listen, this story is about that. The glacier retreated from here 29 years ago, but it is still here, in every lake, every bog, every river that flows slowly because the near-flat surface gives it no other choice. It smoothed everything, leveled it, buried it under its own material, and withdrew, leaving behind so much water that it still does not know where to go. It remained in hollows, as lakes, remained in lowlands, as bogs, remained in channels, as rivers that in some stretches barely flow at all, simply lying there, slowly changing shape. Belarus is a country that the glacier invented and that water has not released since. It all began with a single event 20,000 years ago, and what happened then still defines every lake, every river, every bog on this land. The north of the country is the Lake District, the land shaped where the glacier worked most densely. The lakes here lie one after another, connected by rivers or separated by narrow, wooded necks of land. Lake Naroch, the largest of them, stretching 8 kilometers, has 3 completely different shores, and these are 3 different worlds. On the western shore, pine trees come almost to the water, their roots holding a sandy slope right at the water's edge. On the eastern shore, forest gives way to reeds, reeds give way to alder bog, the alder bog gives way to forest again, and the boundary between water and land is so blurred that in the rainy season it is impossible to say exactly where it lies. On the northern shore, peat and cranberries reach right to the water, and sundew grows on the sphagnum moss hummocks. 3 different shores of one lake, 3 different smells, 3 different sounds, 3 different sensations underfoot. On a clear September day, the water of Lake Naroch is so transparent that you can see the bottom several meters down. Algae barely stir, fish hang almost motionless in the water, only their tails working slowly. And all of this is visible from the shore above, as through glass. In summer, when the algae bloom, there is no such clarity. The water is greenish and murky. But in September it returns, and then mist hangs over the lake in the mornings. The water still warm from summer, the air already cold, and the boundary between them produces a quiet white haze that lies over the surface until 8 or 9 in the morning, then disappears with the first sunlight. The western Dvina collects water from an enormous area and carries it westward, picking up dozens of tributaries along the way, each of which began somewhere as a bog or emerged from a lake. The rivers of the Lake District are the connections between standing waters, linking what the glacier left scattered. Their current is slow, their banks low and overgrown with alder and willow, and in their shade the water looks dark, not dirty, but simply dark, like strong tea from the dissolved substances of peat. This water is acidic and poor in minerals, but it is alive. There are fish, there are small crustaceans, there are insect larvae clinging to stones in the rare places where the current runs slightly faster. But the most ancient place in the country is not the lakes. It is the forest, the one that was growing before the word to fell existed. Białowieża Forest stands apart from everything else in Belarusian nature, not because it is more beautiful or richer in species, but because it is different in its very nature. Here the forest was never felled, it simply grew. While Rome was built and fell, while states and borders came and went, while all the rest of forested Europe was turning into fields and pastures, here remained a forest that grew before humans arrived, unlike anything that grew after them. Ancient oaks stand here for 100 years, their trunks so thick that 3 adults cannot wrap their arms around them. Their bark is deeply cracked, each fissure deeper than it looks from a distance. Beneath them, there is neither grass nor undergrowth, but a leaf litter half a meter thick, soft and damp, springy underfoot, and with a complex smell of decay, of mushrooms, of something woody and heavy that has no precise name. Białowieża Forest has something that ordinary forests do not: dead trees that no one clears away. They fall and stay where they fell, die standing and remain standing dead for years. This is not neglect, but principle, one you only grasp when you start to look more carefully. A fallen trunk, after a few years, becomes something else. It is covered with moss that holds moisture. Beetles have bored passages through it. Young spruce seedlings grow on it here and there. Spruce is especially fond of beginning life on a rotting tree, rising exactly above the line of the former trunk. A dead tree in an old forest is not an end. It is a different beginning, only a slower one. And in this forest there is someone who is almost impossible to see, but who is certainly here. The European bison appears here not as an event, but as part of the space. You walk along a forest track, and suddenly it is there, in the gap between the trees, standing and watching. A large adult male weighs a ton and is unexpectedly quiet for its size. Its breath is visible as steam on a cold day. It neither runs nor approaches. It simply stands and watches, with a calm that belongs to creatures that have nothing to fear. Then it turns and moves away between the trees, and a few seconds later it is gone, only the branches still swaying where it passed. The last wild European bison was killed here in 1027. There are now several hundred of them in the forest. The forest recovered what was taken from it, slowly, through zoos and breeding programs, but it recovered. The Eurasian lynx in this forest barely exists for humans. Its tracks in the snow, large, round, without claw marks, appear between the trees and disappear, giving no sense of where it was going. It may have passed here an hour ago or yesterday evening. The snow does not say when, only where. The lynx itself does not show itself, not because it is absent. It has simply chosen not to be seen, and that is its decision, not a coincidence. In Białowieża Forest, the Eurasian lynx is a permanent resident. It is never seen here, but it is present, and that presence is felt without the help of eyes. This forest knows how to conceal the living, but in spring it can no longer stay silent. The Belarusian forest in spring begins from below. First, the earth thaws on sunny clearings, on the southern slopes of hills, where the snow melts first, and immediately, without pause, the first flowers. Colt's foot on the bare earth, wood anemone in the beech groves of central Belarus, corydalis under the oaks, a small, almost unnoticeable plant with finely cut leaves and pink-violet flowers, which manages to bloom, set seed, and retreat underground before the forest canopy closes. It is a sprint, a few weeks, and that is it. Then the leaves rise, the light leaves the ground, and until next spring there will be only shadow and moss here. Bird cherry blossoms in Belarus in May everywhere, along riverbanks, along the edges of clearings, along the margins of bogs, and its fragrance at this time hangs over river valleys so thickly that on some roads along the water, the air becomes literally sweet. The bird cherry cold snap is a phenomenon that everyone here knows. When the bird cherry blossoms, cold almost always returns for a few days. This is not superstition, but an observation that reflects a real connection between the flowering phase and the late frosts of spring. Nature is synchronized more intricately than it appears at first glance. And in the south of the country at the same time, something incomparably larger in scale is happening. Belarusian Polesia covers almost a third of the country and is structured differently from the north. There are no chains of lakes here, but there is the Pripyat, the main river of the system, and countless bogs that feed it and that it connects. The Pripyat flows slowly, its banks low and damp, and in spring it floods to the point of inundating the floodplain for dozens of kilometers on either side. This is the most extensive spring flood in Europe. For several weeks, a vast portion of Polesia becomes a shallow sea. Trees stand waist-deep in water. Oxbow lakes merge with the river into a single expanse of water without banks. Roads disappear underwater. The sky is reflected everywhere, in every puddle, in every flooded field, in every channel. At this time, birds from Africa fly in and find here exactly what they need: shallows, fish, frogs, open space. The white stork walks across the flooded meadow, gathering frogs. The gray heron stands motionless in knee-deep water. Overhead fly thousands of ducks that were not here yesterday and will not be here next week. They have stopped for a few days on their journey from their wintering grounds and will move on. A Polesi-raised bog, one that feeds only on rain and snow, is a world of its own. Its surface is convex. The bog grows in a dome upward because the sphagnum moss at the center grows faster than at the edges. In the center of the dome there is open water and floating mats of peat that spring underfoot like a trampoline. Around it, cranberry on thin stems, sundew with glistening droplets on its hairs, cotton grass with white puffs. The air above the bog is special, damp, slightly acidic, with a smell unlike either forest or meadow. The silence here is different from forest silence. It is open, lying horizontally and spreading in all directions at once, and in it you can hear everything: the rustle of sedge, the splash of a frog, the call of a crane 2 kilometers away, which sounds as though it were right beside you. The peat underfoot is time, not metaphorically but literally. 1 meter of peat equals approximately 1,000 years. In the deep bogs of Polesia, peat goes down several meters. There in the lower layers are the remains of plants that grew here before the advent of agriculture. Pollen from Bronze Age trees, seeds of plants that no longer exist in this part of Europe. The bog keeps its archive without anyone asking it to, methodically, layer by layer. When it is drained, the archive is destroyed. The peat oxidizes and exhales carbon that accumulated over millennia. And this happens quickly, in years, not centuries. The bog preserves what no one remembers. Every centimeter underfoot is a separate era. In the forest, trees succeed one another strictly, according to a law that needs no supervision. Birch is the first to arrive where others have left, on a clear cut, on a burn, on an abandoned field. Its seeds are light, the wind carries them for kilometers, and already a year after the land has been left, it is covered with young birches, thin as a finger, with leaves that tremble at any movement of air. After 20 years, it is already a grove. After Sorok years, spruce and oak begin to grow beneath the birches. They grow more slowly, but will grow taller, and when they do, they will shade the birch. and the birch will begin to die. It has prepared the ground for them and now gives way. This is not tragedy, but its role in a sequence that the forest carries out on its own, without help and without a plan. Pine is a different matter. On dry, poor soils where birch would not survive and oak would not grow, pine stands. Its roots go deep in search of water. Its needles retain moisture. And on a hot summer day, the smell of resin in a pine grove is so dense, it seems almost tangible. The trunks in their upper portions are reddish, with thin flaking bark, and in sunshine they glow, while beneath them lie white reindeer lichen, lingonberry, bilberry, and in places, heather. The silence in a pine grove is somewhat different from that of a spruce forest. It is lighter because light reaches the ground, and there is none of the darkness and moisture that spruce creates. Spruce in the Belarusian forests is going through a difficult time, and it shows. Rusty patches of dying trees among the green, entire stretches where the needles have fallen and only gray trunks remain. The culprit is the European spruce bark beetle, a small beetle that in dry years multiplies catastrophically. Weakened by drought, the spruce cannot protect itself with resin in time, and the beetle bores through the bark. In place of the dead spruce forest, birch will grow first, then oak. The forest has not died, it is changing its composition. But this is a process decades long, and the people who saw a living spruce forest here will see something else in its place. But the forest is not only what is visible above ground. A few centimeters underfoot there is another system, invisible and precise. Mycelium underground connects the roots of trees and exchanges nutrients with them. The ancient oak at the center of this network is a node to which hundreds of other organisms are connected. Remove the mycelium and the tree weakens. Remove the tree and the mycelium loses a partner. They have existed together for a long time, and there is nothing accidental in this coexistence. It is precise. It works. A July forest after rain is full of mushrooms, porcini, aspen boletes, chanterelles, slippery jacks, and there are so many that only the best are picked. But a mushroom in this forest is not only what lies on the ground, it is above all the mycelium beneath it. Bracken fern unfurls in May slowly, in fiddleheads each coiling out into a large frond. On a forest clearing in mid-May, it looks like something from another geological period. A dense green carpet of unfolding fronds, each still coiled in a spiral and covered with fine hairs. By June, the bracken stands at full height, waist-deep on a person, and in wet places taller, covering everything beneath it. In its shade, it is damp and quiet, and almost nothing else grows. In autumn, it yellows and lies down. In winter, the snow presses it to the ground, and in spring, the fiddleheads again, with the same precision and at the same time. Lily of the valley in May is everywhere beneath the canopy of the broadleaf forest. Small white bells on curved stems, whose fragrance you sense before you see the plant itself. It is poisonous, all its parts, but thrushes eat its autumn berries and spread the seeds. A poisonous plant reproduces with the help of birds that eat it anyway. Nature finds solutions that cannot be explained by simple logic. Summer has passed. Autumn in Belarus does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, tree by tree. Belarusian autumn begins quietly and takes its time. In early September in Minsk, it is still warm and green, but in the Polesia forests, the first yellow birches have already appeared. Just a few trees, a few branches. Autumn here is not explosive, it is gradual. The color changes tree by tree, week by week. In October, the forest stands in a mixture of yellow, orange, brown, and still green, each tree in its own phase, and this makes it not uniform but composite, complex, where you look and see something different at arm's length. The oak yellows last. It holds its leaves longer than anyone, sometimes until the first frosts, sometimes after them. Yellow-brown oak leaves in the wind, when the birch has long been bare. This is late autumn, its final phase before winter. Cranberries on a raised bog ripen in September, but are at their best after the first frosts. The cold breaks down the cells and the berry becomes softer, sweeter, more fragrant. Picking cranberries on the bog is physically hard work. The sphagnum moss springs and gives way. Your feet sink in. You have to watch where you step at all times. But people have come here for them for centuries, and the bog remembers this in the paths that have formed where people walked most often. These paths are marked on no map. They simply exist. Slightly denser sphagnum, slightly more compressed moss. The memory of how people walked here. The migration of birds through Belarus in autumn takes place almost invisibly. Most fly at night at an altitude of several hundred meters, and they are neither seen nor heard from the ground. But on the shores of large lakes, where the birds stop to feed, you can watch this stream materialize. Lake Naroch in September and October receives thousands of waterbirds, ducks, geese, grebes, waders. They stop for a few days, feed, rest, and move on, their place taken by the next wave. This conveyor runs from August to November every year, regardless of the weather and politics. A bird that nested in the Siberian tundra feeds on a Belarusian lake in October and winters in Africa. An ordinary story for many species that pass through here every autumn. The birds have gone, the leaves have fallen, snow has not yet come. November has arrived, the darkest month. November in Belarus is the darkest, not the coldest. The leaves have fallen, the snow has not yet come. The sky is covered with low gray clouds with no break. Bare trunks, gray light, damp dark earth, the smell of rotting leaves and wet bark. Few birds, only those that winter here. A tit flits between the branches. A nuthatch walks headfirst down an oak trunk, probing every crack in the bark. A woodpecker hammers a dead tree 100 meters away, and in the silence of the November forest, that sound is heard as clearly as if it were right there. This is not a violation of the silence, it is part of it. Silence here has a texture. In it you can hear every individual sound, the creak of a branch under the weight of snow, the fall of a clump of snow from a spruce crown, the crack of ice on the river, which is sometimes heard far from the water and sounds like a shot. None of this destroys the silence. All of it composes it. The first snow, when it finally settles, changes everything at once. The forest becomes different, lighter, quieter, with a different geometry. White branches against dark trunks, snow on the crowns of the spruce forest that the branches hold, and tracks in the fresh snow. A fox passed along the edge of the clearing. A hare crossed a firebreak in leaps. A wild boar went through an alder grove. A moose walked along a stream, slowly and without hurry, leaving deep impressions in the snow. They were all here last night, not one is visible. The snow keeps this information until the next blizzard. Then it will be gone, as if it never was. Then snow covers everything. Water hardens, winter comes. January in the Lake District is above all ice. The lakes have frozen, and this change literally transforms the face of the country. The first ice on Lake Naroch on a clear frosty day is transparent. The bottom is visible through it several meters down. Algae frozen inside the ice have kept their shape. They have simply stopped moving. Air bubbles that were rising from below have frozen. White circles of various sizes at various depths. This is a strange beauty that exists for only a few days, until snow covers the ice and it loses its transparency. Then it turns white and opaque, and the lake that was visible in the first clear days after freeze-over will not be seen again until next winter. The Pripyat in winter behaves differently from the lakes. Where the current is faster, ice does not form at all, or forms thin and unreliable, while where the water is almost still, in the Oxbow lakes, in the backwaters, it is thick and solid. This difference between frozen and unfrozen creates the winter landscape of Polesia, the black water of an ice hole in a white field of snow. Above the ice hole, steam rises. The water is warmer than the air. At its edge, a mute swan sometimes stands, white on white, with only the water behind it black. It feeds on underwater vegetation, dipping its neck underwater. Its body rises as it does so. Its tail sticks vertically above the surface, and it looks ungainly, and at the same time completely at home. In February in Belarus, the day begins to lengthen noticeably. At noon, the sun already stands a little higher than in January, and the shadows of trees are a little shorter. Snow in open places begins to settle, becoming denser, losing its fluffiness, a thin, icy crust of névé appearing on top. In the forest, no change is yet visible, but the woodpecker drums more often than in January. This is no longer simply the search for food under the bark. This is the mating drum, the territorial signal. The woodpecker knows something about spring that the earth has not yet shown. Belarusian March is a transition that happens slowly and unevenly. Snow retreats from south-facing slopes, from clearings, from sun-warmed glades, while in the lowlands and in forest shadow, it still lies. The ground where the snow has gone is damp, almost black, and smells the way it smells only in March, of rotting leaves and something alive beneath them that is starting to work after the winter pause. The first flowers appear here on these warmed patches, coltsfoot yellow on a bare stemless stalk, white wood anemone, fragile, which you do not notice until you are right beside it. They do not wait for full warmth. What is there is enough. The white stork arrives in Belarus in March and April, and its appearance above a village is noticed. It flies high on rising thermals, effortlessly, with barely a wing beat. A bird that knows how to use thermals better than most. It lands on its old nest on a post or rooftop, looks around, begins to repair it. The nest may have stood here for decades, added to each year, occupied each year. The white stork does not arrive in snow. It knows when to fly, and this knowledge is more precise than any forecast. Its arrival is by fact, not by calendar. The Pripyat floods in April, and that word does not convey the scale. It does not simply overflow its banks. It occupies space that was meadow, field, and forest in winter. The water rises by several meters and moves away from the channel for several kilometers. Trees stand chest-deep in water. Oxbow lakes merge with the river into a single expanse of water without banks. The sky is reflected everywhere, in every puddle, in every flooded field, in every channel. And this multiplication of the sky makes the space larger than it is. In the flood, fish that have emerged from their winter quarters feed in the shallows. Thousands of ducks that were not here yesterday fly over the water. A gray heron stands knee-deep, motionless as wood. The white stork walks through the shallows, lifting its legs high. In a few weeks, the water will recede, and all of this will disappear until next spring. Ornithologists from across Europe come to Polesia in April and May, not because there are rare birds in captivity here, but because here there are common birds in wild space that exist nowhere else in such volume. The wetland environment of Polesia is a complex mosaic, a raised bog with a convex dome of sphagnum moss, where the water is acidic and poor, a fen with sedge and reeds, where groundwater is rich in minerals, alder swamps along rivers, where the water is dark brown from peat and the trees stand on hummocks between which you will sink to your knees, flood meadows, half the year underwater, half the year green and flowering. Each type is a different smell, a different sound, a different composition of life. In a few kilometers, you can walk through 4 different worlds, each complete and self-contained. The birds have come. The water has risen. Next comes summer, and with it, life right at the surface of the water. Summer on the Belarusian rivers is concentrated by the water. On a branch above a slow river sits a small blue bird, implausibly bright against the green bank, the kingfisher. It sits motionless and looks down. Then it drops like a blue spark, goes under the water, and re-emerges with a fish held crosswise in its beak, returns to the same branch, and all of this takes a few seconds. Its burrow in the bank is a straight horizontal tunnel up to half a meter long, which it dug itself, with a widening at the end where the eggs lie. The smell from this nest is a mixture of fish remains and damp earth. Above those same rivers and lakes in summer, the osprey circles. It drops into the water vertically, feet forward, goes under the surface, and re-emerges with a fish. Its feet are specially constructed. Two toes can rotate backward, creating a symmetrical grip. This allows it to hold a slippery fish securely. The osprey dives from a height of several dozen meters, enters the water, and takes off with the fish with almost no pause. And if the fish is large, it literally tears itself out of the water, shaking off the spray in mid-flight. Its nests are enormous constructions of branches at the tops of trees, which it uses for years and adds to each season. An osprey nest on an old pine above a lake is a structure that has been built over decades. The Belarusian lakes in July are a place where life concentrates in layers. On the surface, water lilies and yellow water lilies, white and yellow flowers on broad leaves. Below the surface, fish in the shade of those leaves, in the coolness they create. Along the banks, reeds, and in them a life of their own, almost invisible from outside. A reed bunting sits on top of a stem and sings. A bittern stands in the denser thickets vertically, its neck extended and its head raised, blending with the stem so precisely that you pass within a meter and do not see it. Its call at dusk, low, booming, like a blow on an empty barrel, is one of the most distinctive sounds of the Belarusian waterways in summer. The Eurasian beaver on the Belarusian rivers works at night. During the day, it is in its lodge or in a burrow in the bank, and at night it fells trees, drags them into the water, builds or repairs a dam. Its dam on a small stream raises the water level upstream, and this changes everything around it. Trees on flooded banks die, but woodpeckers and owls immediately move into the dead trunks. Open water forms, ducks and herons arrive. The groundwater level rises across the surrounding area. After a few years, the beavers leave, and in their place remains a boggy meadow with dead trunks over water. In a decade, a forest will begin to grow here. The beaver changed the landscape unintentionally, simply by living, and this is happening all across Belarus at the same time, on thousands of streams and rivers. Above the water, others, those whose voices carry for kilometers. The common crane in the Belarusian Polesia is a common bird, but not a background one. Its call carries for kilometers and cannot be mistaken for anything else. In spring, when a pair dances on the bog, bowing, leaping, spreading its wings, it is one of the most impressive natural spectacles that can be seen here. The cranes return to the same bog each year, sometimes to the very same nest, which they adjust and add to. In autumn, they gather on pre-migration feeding grounds, several thousand birds on one field in October, their calls creating a sound backdrop that is heard from everywhere and drowns out all other sounds. Then one day they leave, the field empties. Silence falls so abruptly it is as though someone has turned off the sound. The black stork lives in the old forests of Belarus, in Białowieża Forest, in the large forest massifs of Polesia. Unlike the white stork, it does not live near villages. Its world is a forest stream with clean water and old forest around it. Black, with a glossy sheen on its feathers. With a bright red beak, it looks unexpected in the forest half-light. An encounter with it is accidental. It does not allow you to come close, takes off at a human's approach with a clap of wings that in the forest silence sounds like a shot, and disappears between the trees. Białowieża Forest is one of the most important nesting sites for it in Europe, precisely because it has old forest and clean forest streams, something that is becoming rarer everywhere. The white-tailed eagle above a Belarusian lake is the largest bird you can see in flight here. Its wingspan reaches 2.5 meters. It is not fast, it is slow. It waits on a branch for hours, then takes off heavily and flies low over the water, snatches fish from the surface, takes prey from other birds, does what works, without elegance, but with results. Its silhouette above a lake in the Lake District on a clear autumn day, broad wings, short tail, is recognizable even from far away. It does not hide and does not conceal itself. Large, slow, confident in its right to this place. Summer and autumn have passed. Leaves are falling. The smell of rotting leaves in the beginning of the end of the year. The Belarusian forest at the end of October, bare birches that were golden just recently, fallen leaves on the ground, wet and rotting, clumping together and darkening within a few days of falling. The smell of this layer is one of the densest and most distinctive smells of the Belarusian autumn. In it is both the end of summer and the beginning of winter, and something of both at once. Beneath this layer, life continues that cannot be seen. Mycelium breaks down the organic matter, earthworms process it, bacteria carry the process to its conclusion. What was a leaf in September will by next spring have become part of the soil. This is not a metaphor for cyclical renewal, but literal chemistry happening a few centimeters underfoot. December in Belarus is full winter. The sun rises low, the day is short, about 8 hours on the darkest days, and after 4 in the afternoon, it is dark. The moon on snow creates blue shadows from the trunks that lie on the white, like a black and white photograph. And in this moonlight, the forest reads differently. Not as a forest, but as a drawing of a forest, simplified to trunks in shadows. Somewhere in this drawing, a wolf pack moves. Its howl is heard on a January night for kilometers. It spreads between the trees, reflects off snowy slopes, comes from several directions at once, so that it is impossible to tell exactly where from. This sound has always existed here, before villages, before roads, before everything. It continues to exist. Belarus is in no hurry, and this is not a tourist slogan, but a literal description of its nature. Its rivers run slowly, its forests grow long, its bogs accumulate peat a millimeter a year. Everything here lives in its own rhythm, not the one set by humans, but the one determined by the earth, water and climate long before the word Belarus existed. And as long as the Pripyat floods every spring, as long as the ancient oak in Białowieża Forest stands for its 6th century in a row, as long as the common crane returns to its bog in April, this place continues to be what it has always been: quiet, green, deep. Please write in the comments how you found this story. It really matters to me to understand whether what you just heard got to you. Which is closer to you? The silence of Białowieża Forest, where the ancient oaks have stood for 8 centuries in a row, or Polesia in April, when the water of the Pripyat takes over the field, the forest, and the road. And tell me also, do you prefer watching in horizontal format or vertical for your phone?